All right, let's move on to the very latest out of Israel, and especially with regards to our government's unconditional support for their assault and annihilation of the Gaza Strip. We have more rhetorical pushback from the Biden administration, especially vis-a-vis Bibi Netanyahu. This is Jake Sullivan yesterday talking about how Biden rejects the straw man that Bibi has laid out, that invading Rafah is necessary to beat Hamas. Let's take a listen to how he framed that.
The Israeli government is now talking about launching a major military operation in Rafah. The president and the prime minister spoke at length about Rafah today. The president explained why he is so deeply concerned about the prospect of Israel conducting major military operations in Rafah of the kind it conducted in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. First, more than 1 million people have taken refuge in Rafah. They went from Gaza City to Khan Yunis and then to Rafah. They have nowhere else to go. Gaza's other major cities have largely been destroyed. And Israel has not presented us or the world with a plan for how or where they would safely move those civilians, let alone feed and house them and ensure access to basic things like sanitation. Second, Rafah is a primary entry point for humanitarian assistance into Gaza from Egypt and from Israel. An invasion would shut that down, or at least put it at grave risk, right at the moment when it is most sorely needed. Third, Rafah is on the border with Egypt, which has voiced its deep alarm over a major military operation there, and has even raised questions about its future relationship with Israel as a result of any impending military operation. Now, the president has rejected, and did again today, the straw man that raising questions about Rafah is the same as raising questions about defeating Hamas. That's just nonsense. Our position is that Hamas should not be allowed a safe haven in Rafah or anywhere else. But a major ground operation there would be a mistake. It would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis, deepen the anarchy in Gaza, and further isolate Israel internationally. More importantly, the key goals Israel wants to achieve in Rafah can be done by other means. On the call today, President Biden asked the Prime Minister to send a senior interagency team composed of military, intelligence, and humanitarian officials to Washington in the coming days to hear U.S. concerns about Israel's current Rafah planning and to lay out an alternative approach that would target key Hamas elements in Rafah and secure the Egypt-Gaza border without a major ground invasion.
So there you go. Again, Saagar, I'm curious your reaction, but, sort of upping the ante in terms of the level of rhetoric. What I'm not hearing is still any actual concrete policy change.
Look, I think that they're trying, from their perspective, they have tried to delay this as long as they have. They believe that it was, they believe it's been successful, at least so far, because it hasn't happened. From what I understand, there is a new hostage negotiation, temporary ceasefire thing happening right in Qatar. I don't know. Lived through this movie before.
Yeah, remember when we were supposed to get that done before Ramadan?
We've lived through many of these movies before. That said, people are still talking. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They're trying to forestall it. At the very least, I think what the Biden administration tried to do is hold off any sort of assault during the month of Ramadan, which the Israelis keep saying that they won't do, but then they still haven't done it, at least so far. I'm not exactly sure. What I do know is that increasingly, that from the White House's perspective, there's been spit in the face now so many times that they are beginning to look ridiculous, where they're like, well, we've asked the Israelis to do this, and it's not happening. Well, we've asked the Israelis to do this, and it's not happening. And they rely on obfuscations or just non-acknowledgement. And in this particular case, if there is a Rubicon cross with Rafah invasion, it would just be even more humiliating to them. But again, from the Israeli perspective, why would they heed their warning? There's no reason to do it. Biden literally said himself on tape, on camera, that he will never condition aid to Israel.
He says, I will never leave Israel.
It's like, okay.
So you can have Jake Sullivan on here pushing back on your straw man all you want. You said you would never leave Israel. You said you would never condition aid, specifically called out Iron Dome. But, in this same sentence where he's supposedly laying out a red line, he's immediately saying, well, there really is no red line. And again, words are fine. Bibi does not care about words. That is very clear. So they had to escalate from those leaks that used to go where they're having tough conversations to now coming to the podium and doing some rhetorical pushback and, greenlighting Schumer's speech calling for a new government. These things are noteworthy. I'm going to show you a few more noteworthy comments from other Democratic politicians. as long as there is no change in policy, it literally doesn't matter. And I don't think that they have pushed back anything with regard to Rafah. Remember, we were looking at those reports when BB started talking about going into Rafah, and it became clear they had these plans, saying, well, they're not really ready to do this right now. We saw this in Haaretz had a whole analysis of like, they're 100% going to go in, but they're not prepared to. They don't have the troops on the ground. They don't have the plan worked up, et cetera, et cetera. So it's no surprise that it has taken a while for them to be able to execute on these plans. But make no mistake about it, Jake Sullivan calling them out for their straw man is not going to dissuade them from continuing the horrors that we have seen, as none of the rhetoric has dissuaded them from continuing, for example, starving this entire population. Put a pin in that because I've got more on that. I think part of the context, let's put this next piece up on the screen, for why you're seeing this different rhetoric from the Biden White House is because they have finally, belatedly realized that his unconditional support for Israel is a disaster for his electoral aspirations. This NBC News report is so revealing on a number of levels. So headline here, behind the scenes, Biden has grown angry and anxious about re-election effort. In a private meeting at the White House in January, allies of the president just told him his poll numbers in Michigan and Georgia, kind of important states, had dropped over his handling of the war between Israel and Hamas. Both are battleground states. He narrowly won 4 years ago, as we all know. He began to shout and swear, a lawmaker familiar with the meeting said. He believed he had been doing what was right despite the political fallout, he told the group. So I think that part is in some ways the most revealing, Saagar, because it's not like he's rethinking what he did. He still thinks he's right. He's just upset about the political fallout, which is why they're attempting this messaging shift from we're behind Israel to we have problems with what Israel is doing. We're just too impotent and ineffective to actually change course.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At the same time, this is also very noteworthy. Nancy Pelosi is even now directly calling out Israel for their starvation policy. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
The issue of food in Gaza is a very big one, and either the Prime Minister Netanyahu is unaware or ill-informed, but the head of the world's central kitchen, Jose Andres, who's there, as you mentioned, Cindy McCain, World Food Program, and any other of these entities that are there to feed the people will tell you there is starvation, there is famine, there is dehydration, because Israel has not allowed the food and the humanitarian assistance to go right in.
So this is significant, Saagar, because in order to be in accordance with American, U.S. law, you cannot ship weapons to a country that is blocking humanitarian aid. And so the fact that Nancy Pelosi is saying that outright is basically an admission that we have been violating U.S. law. Israel's just been compelled to sign this letter, certifying that they're not blocking humanitarian assistance, which is just a complete lie. And we also had Senator Van Hollen similarly indicating they are not in compliance and saying it very directly. Let's take a listen to that as well.
You said last week, senators need to read the classified report prepared by the Director of National Intelligence about the Netanyahu government claims about that agency. You seem to be implying that the links to terror groups are unfounded.
Oh, there's no doubt that the claim that Prime Minister Netanyahu and others are making that somehow UNRWA is a proxy for Hamas are just flat out lies. That's a flat out lie. If you look at the person who's in charge of operations on the ground in Gaza for UNRWA, it's about a 20-year U.S. Army veteran. You can be sure he is not in cahoots with Hamas. Netanyahu has wanted to get rid of UNRWA since at least 2017. That's been his goal, not just in Gaza, but also in the other places you talked about. And if you get rid of UNRWA in Gaza today, it is the primary distribution system for food and aid. So if you cut off funding for UNRWA in Gaza entirely, it means more people will starve, more people won't get the medical assistance they need, and so it would be a huge mistake to cut them off.
Israel has until March 24th to turn in a letter. They reportedly did so. Are they in compliance?
No, they're not as of today. And you're right, this is a very important tool that the Biden administration's put forward. It applies to Israel and any other country that receives U.S. military assistance.
Will President Biden's administration say that they're not in compliance? Are you confident?
I hope they will, because President Biden himself has repeatedly said that the Netanyahu government is unnecessarily restricting desperately needed humanitarian assistance. I mean, the president has said it a number of times. He said no excuses. So it may be that the Minister of Defense in Israel signed this, but I cannot imagine a scenario right now where Secretary Blinken can find that that promise is credible and reliable when the day it was signed. Clearly, the Netanyahu government is not in compliance, because we see that they're continuing to restrict humanitarian assistance.
So then I'm not criticizing here because I think that was a good exchange, but the follow-up question, Saagar, is, okay, well, are you going to vote for continued military aid, given the fact that you're certifying that they are not in compliance? Because that's really the bottom line here. Like, you can express your, bleeding heart liberalism by saying, Israel is starving Gazans and they're blocking humanitarian aid, all of which is completely true. But if you're still going to vote for the weapons to ship, what difference does it make what you say?
Well, the problem is they're not even voting right now, because the Biden administration is going around their back doors to ship weapons to them with no congressional authorization. And this kind of calls back to what we were talking about previously. They did this with Ukraine. They're doing it with Israel. Like, the imperial state basically just has the ability to ship weapons to whoever they want with no authority whatsoever. I mean, remember 8 months ago, they were telling us the Ukrainians were going to run out of weapons. Then they just devalued the weapons stock of everything so that they could tap even more. It's all fakery. They're doing the same thing right now with Israel.
I was thinking about this with regards to this whole bullshit temporary pier situations. Like, if you wanted to build a pier for Americans or like infrastructure for Americans, there'd be a whole process. It wouldn't happen, is the bottom line. And yet when it's, this temporary boondoggle port for some ass-covering PR move for the Biden administration, pretend like they care about the fact that people are starving to death, oh, that can happen right away. It's like, what the hell is this system that we're operating under, literally?
No, they have total unilateral authority. It's totally wrong. I mean, the temporary pier, it's going to cost billions and billions of dollars. Nobody voted for it. Nobody authorized it. Nobody has to fund it. The president has the ability to deploy it, use all these forces, and not a single one of us can do a thing. And look, often it can be a meme, and it can be low IQ, I think, but like, oh, we have all this money for people over there and nothing for people over here. But here, like, you are right. Like, try building anything in the United States of America.
Try building that same temporary pier to benefit, Flint, Michigan, or whatever.
What was that bridge that fell down, like Memphis or something like that?
There was one in Pittsburgh.
Pennsylvania. That's what it was. There was one in Pennsylvania. It took the governor, he did it fast, and it was still not even as fast as something like this. So it's a digression, but it does show you how we've got all the money in the world for Israel, Ukraine, Afghanistan, anywhere else. But whenever it comes to our own people, it's a lot more difficult, and that's because it's anti-democratic.
We've also got healthcare for Havana syndrome, which
is now
officially fake. But healthcare for, let's say, the people in East Palestine who were poisoned. Oh, good luck.
Yeah,
good luck.
That's right.
Just to underscore how dire the situation is, and to rebut the lies that are being pushed now on the Israeli side that, oh, there's no humanitarian crisis, oh, no one's starving to death, these are all lies, et cetera. Lies that are being pushed, by the way, by AIPAC to our members of Congress, elected officials, by lobbyists right here in D.C. Oxfam has a new report on the specifics of the many ways in which Israel is, in fact, blocking aid. We can put this up on the screen. So they flagged 7 different methods that Israel is using to block aid, resulting predictably in the starvation of the entire people. I mean, the level of starvation, hunger, famine in the Gaza Strip has reached absolutely horrifying, unthinkable levels. And it is, I just have no words for the fact that we are standing by and allowing this to occur. So they say, number one, they only allow aid in via 2 crossings into Gaza. They are intentionally leading this dysfunctional and undersized inspection system so that even, what goes through those 2 crossings is minimal and wildly inadequate. They are routinely and arbitrarily rejecting items of aid as having dual military use. We're talking about, things like fuel, generators, including other items vital for a meaningful humanitarian response, like protective gear and communications kit. I know one example I saw, Saagar, is they were blocking tents from coming in after you've displaced basically this entire population. They've cracked down on humanitarian missions, basically sealing off northern Gaza. That's the area where the level of hunger is the most acute and where the people that we have seen, the children and babies that we have seen literally starving to death, are predominantly in northern Gaza. Israel's assault has caught Gaza's own aid workers, they write, and international agencies partners inside a practically uninhabitable environment of mass displacement and deprivation. So the aid workers themselves obviously subject to these same conditions. So how can they perform their duties to help the rest of the population when they themselves are struggling and starving and suffering under severe deprivation? Israel is rendered nowhere in Gaza safe, they write, amid the forcible and often multiple displacements of almost the entire population. You displace the entire population, that's going to make aid distribution pretty difficult and dramatically spike the need, which is why there needs to be dramatically more trucks of aid coming into Gaza after October 7th than there were before, and they're not even able to meet what was going in before, not even close. And they say their attacks are disproportionate and indiscriminate upon civilian and humanitarian assets, including people such as solar, water, power, and sanitation plants, UN premises, hospitals, roads, and aid convoys and warehouses, even when these assets are supposedly deconflicted after their coordinates have been shared for protection. That's obviously something we have covered a number of times, but some of the numbers here, 75% of sewage, of solid waste is now being dumped in random sites. 97% of groundwater has been made unfit for human use. And they write the Israeli state is using starvation as a weapon of war, which is just thoroughly undeniable at this point.
Yeah, I think it also raises the question about this aid. Are they going to inspect a U.S. military port whenever we build it or not? Because I'm starting to suspect, given all of this, that there is going to be at least some clearance. And it's like, that is outrageous, right? That there will be flagging things that we're giving as potentially dual use or whatever, which you can claim about anything, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. What was it? They were like rejected a pair of scissors, like medical scissors, because they could have been used as a weapon. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I encourage people to go read this for themselves. You really should, because you can actually see it.
Yeah, and rejecting things like anesthetics.
Right.
And so you have children getting amputations with no, I mean, it's just beyond belief.
It doesn't make any sense.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.